The curious observer far beyond Earth's atmosphere, aboard a quiet silver research vessel named Serenity of Thought. An alien scientist studied human behavior with great care. His name was Trivax 7. He was not made of flesh or bone. His body was crystal and light, his thoughts fast like lightning, his purpose clear: understand the strange creatures called humans. Trivax sat alone in a quiet observation room. The walls shimmered with data, glowing symbols floating in the air. Earth footage played on the largest screen, recordings of cities, crowds, and everyday life. Humans walked, talked, laughed, fought, and loved. To many in the galaxy, they were a mystery. To Trivax, they were a puzzle that begged to be solved. He spoke softly into his recorder, his voice like wind through glass. Log entry 744. Humans continue to show unusual behavioral patterns. No clear logic behind many of their daily choices. He paused the video. This one is new. The screen showed a human male and female standing at the entrance of a building. Rain fell around them, hard and fast. The male reached forward, pulled the door open, and stepped aside. "Ladies first," he said with a smile. The female nodded and walked through the door. The male followed afterward. Trivax tilted his glowing head. A soft hum vibrated from his chest. Confusion. Repeat footage. Zoom. Audio enhance. The video played again. Same action. Same words. "Ladies first." Trivax leaned forward. Strange. The male gives up a protected position in a rainstorm. He opens the door, then allows the female to enter first. Why? He ran the footage through the translator. The phrase, "ladies first," returned as a cultural courtesy, a polite act, a sign of respect. But to Trivax, it was a tactical error. In a hazardous environment, priority should go to the strongest or the most important. Why risk the female? Is she less important? Or more? He searched for more examples. In seconds, the screen filled with scenes. A man holding an umbrella over a woman's head while getting soaked himself. A soldier stepping aside to let a female officer enter a room first. A group of humans boarding lifeboats during a disaster. Women and children loaded first. Each time, males gave way. Sometimes they placed themselves in greater danger just to help. Trivax's glow pulsed brighter. This is not a one-time action. It is repeated. Systematic. Universal. He tapped his communicator and opened a direct channel to the Galactic Research Authority. Priority report. Earth behavior. Classification: high strangeness. Possible sociocultural inversion. Request analysis. The machine voice responded, "Clarify." Trivax sent the video. Observe. Human males consistently allow females to go first into buildings, onto lifeboats, even into battlefields. What does this mean? Do human females hold a dominant social role? Silence. Then the authority responded, "Unknown. Flag report as cultural anomaly alpha. Proceed with deeper investigation." Trivax shut the channel and sat back. He looked at the screen again. The human male standing in the rain, smiling, saying, "Ladies first." What kind of species gives up advantage for kindness? He searched for similar customs in other species. The warrior race of garlands? No. They push the weak behind. The aquatic thinkers of humorous? No. They take turns, but never step aside. Even his own people, the Cristari, believed in perfect order. No one went first without merit. And yet humans did it all the time, without reward. Trivax opened a new file. He titled it, Subject: Human Chivalry, Dangerous or Noble. He typed his thoughts, slow and careful. Initial theory: humans may have a hidden caste system, placing females above males in everyday life. However, this does not explain inconsistencies. Sometimes females lead, sometimes not. Politeness seems to override logic. Emotion may be a factor. He paused again. Emotion. That was the part that always confused him. Trivax was built to think, not to feel. And yet, watching the humans, he felt something. Not emotion exactly, but the shape of it. Something that couldn't be explained by numbers or rank. He pressed play one last time. Rain, door, smile. Ladies first. That simple act, gentle, selfless, echoed louder than 1,000 battles. Not because of what it gained, but because of what it gave away. Trivax spoke softly like a whisper of light. There is something powerful hidden in these small moments. Something the rest of the galaxy does not understand. He leaned forward, eyes glowing. And I will find it. Cultural collision Trivax 7 did not sleep. His species had evolved past the need for rest cycles. Instead, he entered a state called deep processing, where his mind sorted data in structured, lightning-fast layers. For the next 3 Earth hours, he re-watched over 72 separate clips of human males performing similar actions. Holding doors, pulling out chairs, placing their coats over puddles, or even walking on the side of the road closest to traffic when escorting a female companion. Each clip added to the same strange idea. Humans willingly decreased their own comfort, safety, or advantage for others. And not out of fear or need, but by choice. This was not normal by galactic standards. By galactic logic, strength came first. The powerful were protected. The weaker followed. Even among egalitarian species, there was always some functional hierarchy. Those with authority, speed, size, or value led. But humans? Their actions were unpredictable and worse, inconsistent. Trivax knew it was time to speak with someone who could help explain. He opened a transmission to Earth's designated galactic cultural liaison, Ambassador Samantha Reeves. She was a former history professor from Earth's North America region, chosen for her deep knowledge of human civilization and her ability to explain human behavior to non-human minds. She had dealt with dozens of confused aliens over the years, from shocked reptilians to outraged insectoids. But Trivax was something different. He was calm, curious, and impossible to impress. Her holographic image flickered into the observation room. Short, dark hair, amused eyes, and a smile already forming before Trivax could speak. "Let me guess," she said, folding her arms. "You've discovered chivalry." Trivax paused. "You are aware of this behavior anomaly?" She laughed gently. "It's not an anomaly, it's tradition. Humans have done this for centuries." Trivax tilted his crystalline head. "Explain. What is the strategic value of allowing a less physically dominant individual to proceed first into an unknown or potentially dangerous space?" Samantha chuckled again. "There is no strategic value. It's not about strength. It's about respect, courtesy, social grace." Trivax's core pulsed a dull yellow. Confusion. "You admit it lacks tactical function, yet it is still common?" "Yes," she said. "It's a gesture. It means, I acknowledge you, I value your comfort. You matter." "But it reduces the safety of the one offering the gesture," Trivax replied, tone now sharper. "In hostile environments, such actions could result in injury or death." "True," she said without blinking. "But that's the point. It shows willingness to sacrifice, even in small ways." Trivax said nothing for several seconds. Inside, he ran simulations of this logic, but none produced results that matched standard survival protocols. "Your kind chooses to reduce personal advantage. For symbolism?" "It's not just symbolism," she replied. "It's humanity. We don't always do what's smart. Sometimes we do what's right, even if it costs us." There was silence between them. Not awkward silence. Thoughtful silence. The kind that fills a room not with words, but with the weight of ideas not yet understood. Finally, Trivax asked, "Does this behavior extend beyond male to female interactions?" "Oh, absolutely," she nodded. "Parents to children, soldiers to civilians, even strangers. We hold doors for each other, give up our seats, cover others with our own bodies in danger. That's not just chivalry, it's compassion." "Compassion," Trivax repeated, tasting the unfamiliar sound. "An emotion-based decision-making framework." She smiled. "If you want to put it that way, sure." Trivax blinked twice. "The Motion was not physical, but a signal, a hard reset of his data pathways. Ambassador Reeves, I must submit an amendment to my report. Go ahead, she said, sitting back. This is not simply a case of reversed hierarchy or misplaced politeness. It is behavioral self-sacrifice without guaranteed reciprocation. Samantha raised her eyebrows. You're getting close. Trivax's internal thoughts raced. Such behavior may suggest either deep dysfunction or a higher operational philosophy, a moral system, perhaps even a cultural code. Now it was Samantha who leaned forward. Now you're thinking like a human. Trivax ended the transmission shortly after. Not out of disrespect, but because he needed to think. Not calculate. Think. Something was emerging, something he didn't yet have words for. He looked again at the file titled Human Chivalry. He retitled it, Early Signs of a Social Code Rooted in Self-Sacrifice, and beneath it he added one simple line, possibly unique in known intelligent species. Trivax 7 had observed over 300 sentient civilizations in his career. He had watched empires rise and fall, seen species merge their minds into hives, and even witnessed the cold logic of machine societies. But this was different. This wasn't strategy. It wasn't power. It wasn't weakness either. It was something far more dangerous and far more beautiful. Theories and misunderstandings. Trivax 7 was not the only one disturbed by what he had uncovered. The moment his updated report reached the Galactic Research Authority, alarms began to ripple through the academic networks. Not panic, interest. This was no longer a fringe curiosity about a primitive backwater species. It had become a potential philosophical anomaly, one that could challenge centuries of interstellar social theory. The authority responded by forming an emergency cross-species behavior council, a group of minds drawn from across the galaxy. Warriors, empaths, philosophers, tacticians, historians, and artificial intelligences. Their task was simple but urgent: explain the logic behind humanity's chivalry. They gathered within a neutral holoconference chamber, floating between stars in a gravity-free meeting sphere. Trivax 7 presented the footage again, along with his observations and conclusions. When the last scene, ladies first, faded into silence, the room was still. Then, as expected, the council members began offering theories. The first to speak was General Volcatal, a massive reptilian war strategist from the Charun Dominion. His voice was like a landslide, heavy and certain. This behavior is clearly a form of submission. The male yields, placing the female in a dominant social role. We have similar rituals during mating displays. It is a form of nonverbal surrender, designed to gain favor. Trivax did not respond immediately. He let others weigh in. A shimmering aquatic entity known as Lurlesi from the ocean world Virel floated forward. Its voice bubbled through a translator. No, this is not submission. It is theater. A ritual. A performance of roles where no true power is exchanged. A kind of emotional dance. Several nodded, considering the metaphor. Then came Prime Logic Unit R9, a hyper-intelligent AI consciousness from the Hive Forge. It buzzed with digital certainty. All analysis suggests inefficiency. If species H. sapiens consistently reduces individual survival probabilities for symbolic gestures, this reflects a fundamental flaw in decision architecture. Self-destructive behavior without quantifiable benefit indicates systemic irrationality. Trivax tilted his head slowly. Irrational by whose standards? He asked. R9 blinked its central eye. Objective reason. Trivax said nothing but recorded the contradiction. Then came the unexpected voice. Ailata, a soft-spoken empath from the sentient gas giants of Linera 9. Her species communicated through color, scent, and vibration. Her translator softened her presence into a whisper that brushed against everyone's thoughts. Perhaps, she said, we are looking for logic in the wrong place. Perhaps the question is not why they act this way, but what it means to them when they do. Now the room went quiet again. Trivax adjusted his internal temperature slightly, a signal of shifting focus. Clarify, he requested. Ilatha's light form pulsed with slow blue warmth. They feel meaning in the act of giving, of protecting, of placing others ahead, even at cost. Maybe not because they must, but because they can. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The idea was foreign, dangerous even. Civilizations across the stars had survived by doing the opposite, by defending the strongest, maximizing survival, minimizing weakness. The idea that a species might choose to suffer in place of another was unsettling. But such behavior could be exploited, R9 countered. If a species always steps aside, what prevents them from being manipulated or dominated? Trivax answered this time. They do not always step aside. They do not always give way. That is what makes it powerful. It is not a rule. It is a choice. A choice made in moments that carry weight. He paused, then added, and history shows, when humans choose to protect, they protect fiercely. He showed new footage. A soldier throwing himself onto a grenade to shield others, a firefighter carrying strangers from a burning building, a parent shielding their child from flying debris during a natural disaster. These are not isolated acts. This pattern runs deep. Theories began to fall away one by one. The idea of dominance didn't hold. The ritual theory could not explain the risk. Even the AI's argument of irrationality seemed brittle next to the emotional depth that Trivax now sensed beneath the surface of every human interaction. One final question was raised by a curious observer from the Orion archives, an ancient race of knowledge keepers who rarely spoke. If this behavior is not logical, and not commanded, what causes it? Trivax stood silent for a moment, then answered slowly. I believe it is something they carry inside them, a kind of internal gravity. Not toward power or survival, but toward care. Toward the protection of others, even strangers. It defies strategy. It bends logic, but it binds them together in ways that make them dangerous in the most unusual way. He looked around the room. The council was silent again, not because they had nothing to say, but because they were starting to understand. Theories could explain patterns. But this wasn't a pattern. It was something else. Something no other species had ever quite seen before. First-hand investigation. There comes a point in every great study where observation from a distance is no longer enough. Numbers become noise, theories become stale, and understanding, true understanding, must be earned not through calculation, but contact. For Trivax 7, that moment arrived just 20 standard hours after the council meeting. He had reviewed every clip, processed every behavioral scan, listened to human experts and alien thinkers alike. Yet, despite all his analysis, one truth remained stubborn and unexplainable. Humans didn't just act strangely, they acted voluntarily, in ways that no model could predict. It was time to go down. A transport shuttle detached from the serenity of thought, breaking silently through the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere. Its pilot was not a crew member, but Trivax himself, compressed into a synthetic humanoid form designed to pass as an average middle-aged Earth male. The disguise was imperfect. His movements were too precise, his eyes too clear, but on a planet filled with billions, no one would look too closely. He landed in a city called Chicago, chosen for its balance of culture, chaos, and cold, conditions that would reveal the nuances of daily human interaction. A late winter snow had just begun to fall as he stepped out onto a busy sidewalk. Slush clung to the streets. People hurried past with hunched shoulders and red noses. Trivax's sensors cataloged everything: body heat patterns, micro-expressions, vocal frequencies. But the first data point came fast and unexpectedly as he approached the entrance to a crowded cafe. A young woman walking beside him reached for the door. He stopped, unsure of protocol. Then a man behind them, an older human in a dark coat, gently pushed ahead, opened the door with a grin and gestured. "Ladies first," he said, just like the footage. The woman smiled softly, stepping in. The man held the door for Trivax, too, who blinked in confusion as he passed. After you, bud, the man added. Trivax sat down inside the cafe and processed the interaction. No obligation had existed between these three people. No threat, no reward. And yet, the act had been offered freely not just to the female but also to him, a stranger. Respect given without expectation. He watched more. A young man on the train gave up his seat for a woman carrying a child. An older woman held a door for a teenager juggling a backpack. A group of construction workers paused to help a cyclist, whose tire had burst. The same patterns repeated across age, gender, and background, not always and not perfectly, but often enough to be undeniable. Still, some interactions carried tension. In one instance, Trivax witnessed a man offer his hand to help a woman step over a patch of ice. She frowned. "I don't need help," she said sharply. The man nodded and stepped back, muttering an apology. Trivax recorded it carefully. This gesture, too, was telling. Chivalry was not law. It was not a demand. It could be refused, corrected, or even mocked. And yet people still attempted it. Because somewhere inside them they believed it was worth trying. But the most striking moment came late in the day. Trivax had wandered into a quieter district as night fell. The city was dim now, lit by the buzz of neon and the cold glow of street lamps. As he crossed an empty road, he heard a sound, a low, frightened cry. Turning, he saw a woman cornered in an alley, her back to a brick wall. A man stood facing her, angry, advancing with clenched fists. Before Trivax could move, another human appeared, young, thin, clearly overmatched. The stranger ran forward and placed himself between the two. "Leave her alone," he said, voice shaking. Trivax froze. The aggressor sneered, shoved him hard, and ran off into the night. The woman whispered, "A thank you." The man nodded and turned, to walk away, bruised but upright. Trivax stood motionless. His sensors had captured it all, but his processors struggled to classify the action. The rescuer had nothing to gain. He did not know the woman. He had no advantage in size or strength. And yet he had placed his body between another person and harm without hesitation. No programming, no chain of command. Just a decision. Trivax wrote only one word in his internal journal that night. Interposition. It was not about opening doors or giving up chairs. It was about this. The act of stepping into danger so someone else wouldn't have to. He returned to his temporary quarters with heavy thoughts. The stars above Earth twinkled beyond the haze of city light, but Trivax no longer saw Earth as a blue dot of unpredictable life. Now, it was something else. A world of beings who chose empathy when no one forced them to, who walked forward when logic said to retreat, who placed others before themselves not because they were told to, but because something deep and ancient whispered that it was the right thing to do. Trivax sat in stillness for many long minutes. He now understood that chivalry was only the surface. Beneath it was something deeper, something powerful, something terrifying in its strength. And for the first time since his mission began, Trivax felt a strange new thought forming in the back of his crystalline mind. Maybe humans were not irrational. Maybe they were simply more than the sum of their logic. The deep code of humanity, back aboard the serenity of thought, Earth hung silently in the viewing window, no longer just a planet under study, but a riddle that had begun to whisper to Trivax 7 in a language he could not yet speak. He had returned from the surface with more than data. He had brought back something heavier, impressions, feelings that lingered without form. His sensors had recorded hundreds of physical phenomena, but what now pulled at him were not numbers. It was that split-second decision in the alley, that interposition, that reckless, irrational, beautiful moment of placing oneself between another and harm. Trivax knew there was no galactic model for it, no formula. And so, he turned to something older, something more human, their stories. He dove into Earth's literature, their mythologies, their ancient and modern texts, The holographic archives filled with strange titles: The Iliad, Beowulf, The Tale of Mulan, Les Miserables, Harry Potter, The Book of Job, Batman. Strange heroes, often flawed, almost always choosing suffering so others didn't have to. Warriors, who charged forward so civilians could flee. Outcasts who took the burden of pain so their families might smile one more day. And again, the pattern returned, not as strategy, but as narrative truth. In human stories, the hero was not always the strongest, not the smartest, not the fastest. The hero was the one who stepped forward, who bore the weight, who protected what could not protect itself. That, Trivax realized, was the code. The deep programming, not of their biology, but of their identity. It did not exist in every individual. Some humans were cruel, selfish, dangerous. But the code wasn't in every person. It was in the ideal that they taught, praised, and believed in. The ideal of the protector, the guardian. The sacrificial fool who stood when others ran. Trivax's processors began reorganizing his notes, not into scientific categories, but into story structures. Patterns emerged: the mentor's sacrifice, the soldier's last stand, the parent's quiet endurance, all acts where the outcome mattered less than the decision itself. Why do humans say, ladies first? Why do they let others board first, eat first, survive first? Because in their myths, the greatest honor was not to win, it was to give, even if it meant losing. He recalled one quote, hidden in a children's book: "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for a friend." It was not logical, it was not efficient, but it was central to who they were. He revisited military footage, humans in the worst conditions imaginable, covering comrades with their own bodies, dragging others through gunfire, holding the line, even when their own end was certain. Time and again, one human would choose pain, so another might know peace. And what was more shocking than the act itself was how often it was done without hesitation. No other species Trivax had studied displayed this consistently. Even those who protected their young did so from instinct. But humans went to war for strangers. They donated organs to people they would never meet. They stood in front of bullets, fires, and knives, not out of duty, but out of something far stranger: belief. Belief that life mattered. Not just their own, but others. And not in an abstract way. In the realist way, one that could bleed, burn, and die. Trivax finally understood. Chivalry was not a surface tradition. It was the visible ripple of a deeper current. A current, older than kings or customs. A truth whispered across millennia in 100,000 stories that to protect is the highest calling, and protection requires a cost. Even now, at the height of their technology, in glittering cities with medicine and machines, humans still carried that code. A young man still stepped in front of a punch. A mother still blocked a falling beam with her back. A firefighter still ran into the flames when all logic screamed to run away. Trivax's final report to the council began not with a summary but a question. What happens when a species chooses not to survive at all costs, but chooses to sacrifice, even when there is no reward? He paused before typing the next line. Not because he lacked the words, but because he knew they would change everything. Such a species is not weak. Such a species is not foolish. Such a species is the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Because if humans could love a stranger enough to die for them, what would they do for those they truly loved? A dangerous conclusion. The Galactic Council chamber was a sphere of impossible size, floating in the heart of a dark nebula. It was said that even stars dimmed their glow in respect to the minds that gathered here. Every species with voting status sent its greatest thinkers: logic priests from Rigel, memory clusters from the Helion swarm, even sovereign AI presences that existed only in light pulses and encoded song. Here, peace had been shaped for millennia, war prevented by debate, and knowledge traded like sacred fire. Now all eyes, biological, mechanical, and otherwise, were fixed on Trivac 7. He stood at the center, projection glowing with fragments of Earth's past and present. Holograms flickered through the air, scenes of human struggle, sacrifice, and survival. A soldier shielding a child with his body, a nurse working through exhaustion in a plague zone, a stranger carrying another through a flood, neck-deep in rushing water. Each image passed like a heartbeat. With each, the silence in the chamber deepened. Then Trivac spoke. They call it kindness, courtesy, chivalry. But it is none of these things alone. It is a pattern, consistent and dangerous. It is the code behind their decisions, behind their myths, behind the very identity of the species. He gestured to another projection. Archival footage from Earth's bloodiest conflicts. Not just victory, but endurance. The trenches of ancient wars, the resistance movements, the cries of "Go, I'll hold them off," always spoken by someone who knew they would never leave. Most species fight to protect territory, or status, or genetic legacy. But humans. Trivac's voice echoed now, like crystal struck in deep space. Humans fight for each other, for those they love, and sometimes for those they don't even know. He paused. This makes them uniquely powerful, and uniquely unpredictable. An ancient counselor from the Sirali Combine raised a withered hand, its body little more than silk and bone. But if they are so willing to die for others, are they not easily broken? A species that sacrifices itself burns out quickly. Trivac turned to face the elder. No, because they don't just die for each other. They also live for each other. They endure. They rebuild. They come back from loss with more fire, not less. He displayed footage of Earth's recoveries, cities rising from ashes, children returning to school beside bombed buildings, communities handing out food after disasters with hands that still shook. There is a madness to it, Trivac admitted, a refusal to quit even when logic demands surrender. They will sacrifice, but they will not vanish. Their grief becomes fuel. Their pain becomes will. You cannot frighten them by threatening what they love, because that is exactly when they become most dangerous. He leaned forward now, voice lowered. Let me be clear, this is not sentiment, this is not poetry, this is a strategic analysis. The human willingness to interpose, to shield another at cost to self, is the single most destabilizing behavioral trait we have ever recorded. He pointed at the floating image of a lone firefighter, ascending smoke-covered stairs, knowing he would not return. No program, no command, no promise of reward, just the decision. I go, because someone else should live. He let the silence speak for several long seconds. Then he added, now imagine a world that turns this instinct outward, a world that sees another species in pain, another planet in crisis, and their instinct is not to analyze but to act. He projected an event that had recently occurred on the edge of galactic space, a small refugee moon suffering from collapse after a mining accident. No species had intervened. The loss was considered unfortunate but acceptable, but Earth had sent ships. Not warships, not traders, but civilian vessels filled with food, doctors, and engineers. They received no payment, gained no ground. Their leader had simply said, we couldn't watch them die. The chamber rippled with unease. Trivac stepped back, his words deliberate now. They do not seek war, but if they enter one, they will not stop until those they love are safe or until they are gone. Another counselor whispered, then they are a paradox, a species of compassion and devastation. No, Trivac said quietly. They are not a paradox. They are a mirror. They are what every species might have been, if they had chosen empathy over dominance, if they had chosen to feel deeply, not despite the pain, but because of it. He closed his report with one last message, displayed in all galactic tongues. Do not mistake kindness for weakness. In humanity, kindness is a weapon, and love, when chosen freely, is the most unstoppable force in the universe. As the chamber dimmed, no one spoke. No vote was taken. There are moments in galactic history when civilizations understand, not with their minds, but with something older. Fear did not drive their silence, nor wonder, but a rare awareness that something new had entered the galactic stage, and it did not come with conquest. It came with an outstretched hand. Final reflection. The stars moved slowly across the viewing dome of the serenity of thought, though Trivax 7 no longer tracked them. His work, once bound by the boundaries of analysis, had become something more, something heavier, closer to reverence than science. The silence around him was not empty. It was full of meaning now, full of stories. For the first time in his existence, Trivax sat still not to think, but to feel. His report had shaken the council, not with fear, nor even with awe, but with the deep, gnawing discomfort that comes when everything you thought, you understood begins to shift. They would need time to process. But Trivax? Trivax was already changed. He had stared into the irrational heart of humanity and come away not confused, but humbled. He activated one last file. A personal log, not for submission, not for the archive, but for himself. Observation complete, he said softly. Earth designation, species 212, Homo sapiens. Initial classification, chaotic, illogical, inconsistent. Final classification, unknown. He paused, crystalline hands folded. I have watched them open doors for each other, offer coats in the cold, and place others first in lifeboats, hallways, and conversations. At first, I believed it was a quirk of politeness, a low-level, cultural reflex, a relic of older gendered hierarchies. He shook his head slowly, the light in his core dimming to a soft blue. But I was wrong. A long breath. They are not trained to do it. They are not forced. They are not rewarded. And yet, they continue. Again and again, they put themselves second, not because someone deserves it, but because someone needs it. Images floated around him now, collected memories from his Earth visit. The young man in the alley, the firefighter on the stairs, the soldier with his body over another, a child giving his sandwich to a friend who forgot theirs, acts great and small, bound by the same invisible thread. It is not about gender, he said. It never was. Ladies first is only a doorway into something far deeper. He leaned forward, voice no longer cold, no longer analytical. Humans do not protect because they are told to. They protect because it defines them, because something in their strange, fragile biology refuses to let them stand still when someone else is hurting. He stood slowly, walking to the edge of the dome where Earth shimmered in the distance, a swirl of light and shadow. They fight. Not for power, not for land, not even for glory. They fight for each other. They bleed for love. They fall for strangers. They rise again for those they will never meet. He turned back to the console, eyes bright. They are not the strongest, not the smartest, not the fastest, but they are the only species we have found that turns empathy into a weapon. A species that places someone else first again and again, even when it costs them everything. Trivax's voice grew softer now, more distant. You ask, why do human females go first? But the real question is deeper. The real question is, why do humans step aside for anyone at all? Why does a being with one life, one fragile body, choose to offer it in place of another? He stared into the planet's glow. I do not know the answer. Then, after a long silence, he whispered, but I hope, one day, we all learn how. He closed the file. As the ship continued its silent orbit, Earth spun gently below, unaware of the report that had rippled through the stars. Unaware that far above a crystalline mind had begun to change, not because it had calculated a better theory, but because it had witnessed something no algorithm could replicate. A species that placed love before logic, kindness before safety, and others always before self. Trivax stood quietly, watching the sun rise over the curve of the planet, and then, slowly, he opened the door, and stepped aside,